Hello again, this is UML Operator. All right, welcome to this session. This is part 4 of a multi-part series on business process modeling notation. We're going to be focused in this part on BPMN 1. In the next part, next session, next episode, we'll be on BPMN 2. So BPMN, business process modeling, we're going to focus on business processes. We're going to focus on methods and procedures, or the requirements for doing business given to us by stakeholder. And we're going to be focused on pools that are going to support our participant views as we're modeling some examples for you today. Now, this is going to be very high level, very simple models to start out with to gain the concepts of business process modeling notation, BPMN, or what you'll sometimes hear me shorten and just say BPMN. So this is BPMN 1 that we're going to be covering in this session. So let's start with business processes. So when we drill down to these models, we have 3 business processes that we're going to use. And during this session, you see the infinity sign under these. This means there's a composite diagram underneath them. So I double click on them. They go into a BPMN 1.1 core tooling, give some 1.1 relationships, and maybe we'll deal with 1.1 types. I'll dive down in further detail when we get to BPMN 2, because really this should be, BPMN 2 should be the notation, the standard, the version that you use going forward. But in some cases, there are modelers that are still familiar with BPMN 1.1, and they really don't need all the bells and whistles that come with BPMN 2, the features that were added during the transformation or versioning to BPMN 2. So there might be some reasons for that. So we'll cover some of that in this session as we go into it. But let's go ahead and close this model and go back to our view. So when we're looking at this, we've got customer information as a business process. We have agent assistance as a business process. And then we have case management. And they're relevant to each other, as you can see in the relationships that we have between these. So if we turn on traceability here and we look at the relevance and we go into customer information, we can see the customer information has, and when we get into a simple model, it has a start, it has a transition, that's the sequence right here, to agent assistance, all right? It's needed by, this is this dependency that you see right here, agent assistance right here, and it depends on the customer information. In this case, from this perspective, deals with agent assistance, all right? And it depends on some sort of start event, whatever that is. Now, you heard me use a couple of terms here, like perspective. You're all familiar with what a stakeholder is. And to go into this, I'm going to use TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework. I've been certified for, well, a lot of years. I won't mention those, but it's well over a decade. And this is pretty much the architecture framework that I use when I'm doing software and system architecture, especially for enterprises, right? So the great thing about this particular model from TOGAF, and this is one of my favorites, is that it gives the perspective from the stakeholder. And so you can see that a stakeholder has a system, they have an architectural description, they have a viewpoint, each one has their own viewpoint, and they have their own set of concerns. You see the cardinality here, the multiplicity. So a stakeholder, one-to-many stakeholders, have one-to-many concerns, right? And they have one-to-many stakeholders has a perspective on a system for what they're dealing with in particular use cases. And as you look at the system influences the environment, inhabits the environment, and it has an architecture, all right? And everyone, especially the system, fulfills a mission for the stakeholder, all right? And so when we come to the stakeholder and we go down to viewpoints, viewpoints cover concerns. Viewpoints conforms to views organized by architectural descriptions. And what we're here for is modeling a view or consists of models, right? And that a viewpoint, we're building a library of viewpoints. So this is a great model to reflect on from TOGAF. The latest version that we find in TOGAF, the updated basic concepts view is what it is, looks something like this. I like the other view, I should say, better, diagram better, but you see the same things here, right? And we're all working towards a mission that deals with an architecture, right? And then here you see multiplicity and so on. So I wanted to spend a couple of minutes here talking about TOGAF as we move forward in building our BPMN models, whether they're 1 or BPMN 2. Now we start modeling from various business requirements for doing business. Methods and procedures is another term. So when you're working with a company, working with a shop, you want to understand, well, what are we modeling? What are the nouns and verbs that we're modeling to? Where nouns are your actors and verbs are your functions, right? And lots of things in between. So we start with a set of requirements. Now, this is a very simple view of requirements, high level. I go into shops or enterprises, deal with companies that have dozens of requirements, hundreds, thousands, and more of requirements. So they have these massive libraries that are usually off on another case management platform or another platform where we can mine the data. And I'll cover more of importing data into Sparx for reuse in later sessions, but we import the requirements that we're focused on around the business, either existing requirements or future requirements. You want to bring in all the methods and procedures, the requirements that are necessary to run the business so that you're able to understand the gaps between current mode of operations and future mode of operations. So we're going to pretend for a moment that these are all the requirements that we're dealing with, and that these requirements are a mix of CMO, current mode, or present mode, PMO, of operations, and that they want to make some changes, or they're just coming in and saying, hey, here's our present mode of operations. We want to model it using BPMN. Because in some cases, we might go to a low code or a no code implementation of BPMN to BPEL, BPEL, or Business Process Execution Language. And I may cover that in a later session. We're not going to cover BPEL in this session, or a BPEL engine. I talked briefly about that in the introduction, but when you're going to black box like, ActiveVOS from, I think, Informatica, acquired by ActiveVOS and still owns it. I don't use ActiveVOS anymore. I use Camunda as our engine. And we'll talk more about that when we get into BPEL and BPEL engines, all right? But let's just say we're dealing with these requirements. I'm going to turn on filtering. And you can see that we're dealing with a story the customer has given us that has 10 points, very high level, nouns and verbs. Nouns are in dark red, verbs are in green. And my mind does this automatically, and you do not need to worry about highlighting like this. I'm just showing you how my mind works. So when I'm looking at any requirements, I'm trying to find the actors, the platforms or the systems, the nouns, and then the features and the functions, the methods that are being invoked in the code. We're looking for what web services are using, what microservices are using, what are the capabilities they're fulfilling. And we're able to glean a great deal out of a few words and a few points. Just going into your customer, your stakeholders, and saying, hey, give me a brief story. So in this story, you can see customer engages an agent. The agent collects customer information so that they know who the customer is and verify and pass all privacy and security measures. The agent looks up the customer based off consent. The agent determines the customer's need either by asking questions or using machine learning and AI to predict and prescribe what the potential customer needs may be for such an engagement. The agent, based off of those needs, pulls the methods and procedures case cards out of case management that pertain to solving or reaching a conclusion or an end event to support those needs. The agent determines the case that they're dealing with, constantly validating during the engagement. The agent works with the customer's need or needs, and the customer is satisfied with the agent solution response. And there are lots of ways to be able to validate or verify that. And then once the engagement closes, the agent closes engagement, and then the agent closes the case. Now, these are very simple. There's probably 50 requirements just out of this 10 point. When we're saying the agent's closing the engagement, there's methods and procedures they follow to close an engagement, right? Even after they disengage the customer, before they move on to the next call or the next engagement. And the agent could be in a call center or they could be in a retail store, face to face with the customer. And then when the agent's closing the cases, the agent's done all of the closing procedures of the engagement, and now the engagement platform, case management platform, CRM platform, it has processes that it must do in order to close the case. So, just sitting on the customer and they give us these 10 points, these simple nouns and verbs, these bullet points, we're able to do a great deal. So now let's split our screen in Sparx Enterprise Architect. We put our methods and procedures, our 10 bullet points here, and these 10 points that we elicited from these requirement elements, they could be in any form, notepad, it could be in a note that's floating above your modeling environment. They could be anywhere, but we're going to put those here, and we're going to start eliciting, extracting, abstracting, whatever term you want to use, business processes. And we're going to keep it, again, very simple. So we look at the nouns customer. We also see customer information. So the very first business process that we're going to focus on or look at is customer information. Then we see actor like an agent, and they're assisting the customer. So the next business process is around agent assistant. Now, with the onslaught of artificial intelligence, bots, virtual assistants that we can do, agent assistant could be a human or it could be a machine as an actor. But in this particular case, let's look at the agent as a human. They could be augmented by AI in the case management system or on the side. But we're just going to look at this business process as agent assistance, all right? And the next thing that we elicit from these 10 points is the fact that we need a case management platform. It's either built in the some case management system platform that you've built yourself or from a vendor, or it's part of a customer relation management architecture or platform. And we're just going to call it case management. In this case, keep it high level and simple until we have more details on the architecture, if you remember the TOGAF view, and the architectural descriptions, right? So we're just going to call it case management. So we're going to work with just these 3 business processes for these examples and demonstration. Next, let's look at the relationships between these 3 business processes. So when we look at customer information, we're using a sequence flow from the relationship toolbar right here. We're using a sequence flow that's going from customer information to agent assistance. And we're using a sequence flow from agent assistant to case management. We're also using dependency relationship, is what's natural from the tooling. When we come up here and we look, if we were to draw an association or relationship between, we can see we only have in the drop-down menu dependency, trace, and information flow. Now I'm going to escape out. This is how I drew the dependency from the agent assistant to the customer and the dependency from the customer to the agent. So with traceability turned on, we're telling a story here. So if I select customer information, and I still have up here in layout, I have filtering on around relationships. So you see only the two that are in view that we're going to be focused on. We see that customer information transitions to, or from rather, a starting point. And you're going to see the start event in a model as soon as we get there, right? And you're going to see that the customer information transitions to agent assistance, all right? That's it. The customer information transitions to agent assistant. So let's select it again. And we see that agent assistance is needed by, customer information is needed by agent assistance. Customer information is needed by agent assistance. And then finally, we look at customer information depends on, that's this marker here, rather, needed by was the middle marker, depends on agent assistance. And again, the agent could be an online service. There's no human there. They're supported by a bot. It could be an agent that's on their screen over chat services. It could be anything. We don't know right now. We're just modeling at a high level the relevance or relationships between these business processes. And they're stereotyped. That's what's in these double carets here, if you will, on the element. So let's focus on agent assistant. It becomes interesting because now everything is, all three of them are highlighted. The agent assistant has a transition from customer information. That's the sequence flow. Transitions to case management. That's this sequence flow right here. And eventually transitions to an end event. Hey, I'm done, we're done, and there's some sort of end event. Now that end event could be an intermediate event, or it could be a final end event, right? And that the agent assistance depends on customer information. Can't do business without it, right? Can't help a customer if you don't have a customer to help. And it depends on the case management platform, right? So we're telling a story here, starting with the nouns and verbs and the requirements, or the story, user story, epic story, capability story, whatever the story is from the stakeholder that we're starting our modeling process from. Next, I want to talk about properties that are relevant to each one of the elements. So let's grab our property window, just a property window, and we're going to drag it right here. Probably want to put it off on the left. Grab as much as we can as we're looking at each one of these. So when we're looking at these, we have element properties, and that, you can see the name, customer information, the type is business process, the stereotype is BPMN 1.1 business process. We set an alias. So if you have aliases, when we go to properties in the diagram, and you have aliases, use alias if available. It will put the aliases in your elements, and they're available in all three of these, that further define. Sometimes the name of the business process might be complicated, and you want to come up with an alias that's more simplified so that the stakeholders, non-technical, even technical, can understand what each one of the business processes is. So customer information is also known as summary level perspective in the customer information management platform. Some of our clients, they think CIM, customer information, right? And they have a platform they have for that. And that the agent summary level perspective of the agent assistant platform. And that could be AAP. In this case, it's just AA, right? And then when you're looking at, let's go back all the way out, the case management platform, summary level perspective in case management. Could be CRM, could be some other acronym or full name of the actual case management architecture. All right, so I'm going to turn aliases back off. It's just available for you when you're rendering your elements. So let's keep going. All right, so customer information, there's the alias. You can use keywords. This helps later on when you get into mining your data, using SEO, search engine optimization, best practices. Remember, Sparx is a SQL database. We put our data over on our big data platform so that we're able to mine it and just with all the other data to use in data science. So we're able to mine the data and use it, search it, find it via data management capabilities within our large data, big data architecture. All right. Status, right now, each one of these are proposed. So eventually everyone's going to agree, they might be approved. Or, hey, this business process is already implemented. You have a choice there. Or it's dealing with GDPR, global GDPR, Global Data Protection, or California Consumer Act, any privacy regulation that you might be dealing with, or security, and so on. So it may be mandatory. Regulatory regulations are driving it. And then validated is just in between proposed and the other states. Hey, we validated the architecture, but that's as far, or the business process in this case, that's as far as we got. So these properties are in every element within Sparx. So that's why they're called general. We'll go ahead and minimize that, right? Now we get into the business process properties. And you can see this is relevant to the standard BPMN 1.1, that version out of OMG, all right? And so when we're looking at this, is this ad hoc? We'll dive, further into that. And you have a Boolean response, true or false, right? And then ad hoc completion. I can't make this wider so you can read it. So when I mouse over it, condition, ad hoc completion condition, ad hoc ordering. This is an ordering of the business processes or the element. We're going to see the same type of properties when we get into other elements within BPM, whether they're in parallel as far as ordering, the order in which they flow, or sequential. In this case, it is parallel, right? But how it looks here is sequential. We move from business information into agent assistance. Well, that's not a true statement per se. You could be in customer information and operating with your security business processes, validating the customer, making sure they're not fraudulent and so on. But in the beginning, we're just dealing at a high level. We don't want to put sequential, so we just leave it at the default parallel, right? Assignments, we'll get into this more. Assignments, you're going out and you can pull in assignments from your model library. Categories, we have a memo field, and if we're familiar with a memo field is in data architecture, it's just a larger field than the typical amount of data you're allowed to enter into any other field. There may be a constraint of 16 characters, 256 characters, 255, it doesn't matter. Memo field is open. In database architecture, we may call this a CLOB, C-L-O-B, which is character long object, or a blob, a binary long object. But Sparx provides these memo fields, allowing you to put anything you want into them to be abstracted, to be parsed out of your data for other purposes, especially within Sparx. Okay, language I'm not going to talk about. We'll skip over that one. Process type, let me pull this down. It's none, right? We don't know what the process type is. Is it private? Is it abstract? Is it a collaboration process type, we're just going to leave it at none. Keep it simple. Don't worry about it. All right. And then query language, I'm going to skip over that one too. Status, you have a drop down here. Come here. Where, well, what's the status of this particular business process? Is it active? Is it ready? Is it aborting? Is it canceled? Is it already aborted? Completing? Now, we'll get into this when we get into further detail with the summary level right now. We get into goal level modeling, which I talk about in use cases. We get into function level modeling. You're going to need to get down into, well, what's the state? What's the status of the business process at a particular point within its sequential flow, all right, when you're talking about it. And there's a lot more, but this will make more sense when we get into real modeling as we're moving forward. Pool package reference, I'm going to skip over. When we get to pool package reference, you can come in here and you can look for your perspectives. And they may be pools, and out of your perspectives, you might pull various, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this, pool package references, because what participant or participants are you referring to in this particular business process? And that'll make more sense, hopefully by BPMN 2 show and tell when we get there. So memo fields for didn't mean to do that, back over here. Memo fields for performers, memo fields for input sets, and memo fields for output sets. And again, summary level, don't worry about these properties, all right, as we're going forward. All right, so let's minimize this one. We get into activities, and we're not dealing with an activity here per se, we're just dealing with a business process. When we get into, if you look over in tooling, activities that are, as we drill down into this business process, these will be more relevant. So in the activity, is it abstract? You check it. Again, it's Boolean, on or off. Active, final specification, and then you have other choices to go for. Visibility, this becomes important really in later levels of detail, but I leave everything public, all right? Until you get into business process elements that you sure need to be tagged as protected, private, or package. Now, anybody that is a code developer understands what visibility is within development, code development. This becomes more important when we get down to function level BPMN, and especially if it's relevant to business process execution language or BPEL, right? And then after activity, it's project, the typical metadata that you see in any element within Sparx, all right? So properties are very important as we're going through each one of these. And let me open up activity. So same properties apply to agent assistance as well as case management element. So each element could have behavior. When we get into we'll talk more about behavior when we look at this from a state modeling or state diagram perspective. But so you have behavior, you have parameters you can define both in and out, right? Input and return. That's more advanced, and we're not going to have time to cover this area of properties in this session. And then partitions, again, I'm going to skip over it. But I wanted to get to tag values, all right? And over here in element, because this is an extension of UML 2, all right? That's what Sparx did, and any other vendor out there. They extend UML to fit some industry standard, in this case, BPMN by OMG, right? And so these are tag values. In my opinion, if anybody wants to correct me, go for it. But when you're looking at Sparx, has tag values, nothing changes. It's the same use of tag values, and I talk about tag values in previous exercises, sessions, videos that we've done here. In this particular case, each element has a level. And as I stated earlier, These are at the summary level. So we have tagged these specific elements at the summary level. This could change to goal level business process, which is going to give a lot more details from a composite perspective, down to even a function level where we're actually exposing what APIs, microservices, functions, JavaScripts, BPL, language code within your business process models. We're working at a very simple summary level. Keep this simple. Another important tag value for us was, well, what's the perspective? Well, this business information element is from the customer perspective, looking outwards, right? Then if you go to this one, this is from the agent perspective, looking outwards towards the customer and towards the case management platform. And when you go to case management, it is from a platform perspective. This is an overall architecture, whether it's monolithic or whether it's based off of service-oriented architecture style or a microservice architecture style. So we just simply call it platform. Now, there are many, many more tag values that we want to be able to categorize these as, especially when we get into data mining of the Sparx data, whether inside Sparx or specifically or particularly outside of Sparx. So tag values is very important from a properties perspective dealing with your elements. And we've spent a great deal of time talking about properties, but it's the most important subject when you're doing business process modeling. All right, next we're going to get into participants, also known as pools. So let's move over here. Again, very simple. We have 3 pools. One is for customer information. One is from call center, the agent perspective as a participant. And the third one is from a case management perspective. And so this is in a namespace literally called perspective. So we have a library of our pools. And when you're looking at pools within BPMN, there could be many, many packages and namespaces for each one of them. So you want to make sure that you're keeping them separated when you're modeling, all right? Very important. So again, when we open up this namespace, we simply have 3 pools that we're inventorying here, all right? And you can have your pools within the namespace of the actual model itself. It's up to you. We keep them separately because we want to reuse the pools when we're doing BPM, all right? So this is just how we've done it. When we get into an actual model here in a moment, you'll see more of that. Now, just properties, just like with elements, we use the same tags. So these are summary level pools, right? Each one of them has their own global unique ID, which you would see in properties. If you go over to the actual element project, go down, every element has its own GUID, global unique ID, all right? And let me go back to tags. And it has a perspective. So you have a customer pool from the customer's perspective. You could have a customer pool, of course, a separate GUID, that would be from an agent's perspective. And the same thing goes with call center. You could have whatever the support center, support environment is. You could have, this is from an agent perspective. You could have a pool separate from this perspective from the customer's perspective or even the case management perspective. So you start with the primary perspectives when you're laying out the pools, the participants, so that you're able to organize this. And hopefully this makes more sense in just a moment as we actually look at a simple BPMN model. So let's look at a basic model, all right? So we brought in our scope, our scenario 1 through 10. We brought that in from our requirements development exercise. And you can put those notes anywhere you want. You can put them in the notes section of the diagram. I just happen to put them right here, okay? And then we created a business process element from the toolbox, dragged and dropped it in there, and called it customer support. And the infinity sign means that there's a diagram composite to this element. Let's go ahead and double click and drill down into it. Save time in the video. I went ahead and just drew this model right here, very simple model that shows a start event from the toolbox, sequence flow to customer information process, right? It has a model underneath it. Sequence flows from customer information into agent assistant. Its sequence flows into an end event. We believe that the end event, or in this business process flow diagram, that the agent is going to end the session. It could also come from case management, the end event, could be in parallel or ad hoc. Then we have from the agent assistant, it flowing to transitioning from the agent assistant, right? Right. So don't get ahead of myself here. I can read this and literally tell a story. So I'm telling the story in my head. I need to tell a story to all of you. All right. So when we look at traceability, so we've got traceability turned on over here, and we start at the start event. We're stating that the start event is owned by customer support. That's the primary business process we used to build this model as a composite view. The start event transitions to customer information, and it's needed by customer information, all right? So needed by. So it flows, the dependency is flowing from customer information to the start event, which is stating, hey, the start event is needed by customer information, otherwise the event cannot start, right? Then from customer information, we can see that there's a sequence flow to agent assistant workflow. And the agent assistant workflow transitions from, that's the sequence flow here, customer information. It transitions to, that's this sequence flow here, case management, right? And agent assistant also transitions to the end event at some point, and that's based off the composite model and workflows that are under the agent assistant business process. Now, the end event could be also or from case management. Agent is going to end the call, the session with the customer, but may not end the entire session. Case management may do some post-processing, which then has a final end within this entire workflow here. But let's just leave this in here for a moment, all right? So case management transitions from agent assistant, and it's needed by agent assistant. So agent assistant depends on case management, and case management is needed by agent assistant. All right. So we're able to tell a story in our summary level business process model very easily, very rapidly as we progress. Now, bringing in pools at this point is optional. You don't have to do it in the very beginning when you're doing conceptual modeling, but let's look at it, bringing in the participants using the flow, the business process flow that we just modeled. So in this particular case, the exact same business process flow is applied to participants or pools. So we have the customer pool, we have the call center pool, and we have the case management pool. So what we're stating here is that these business processes are from the customer perspective. And when you're further defining or drilling down, and it's blank right now, we haven't done anything yet, you're stating that this is all happening within this customer pool. When we look at agent assistant, the same thing is applicable. The agent assistant processes that are taking place here are part of this pool. So as we expand the model into more detail, we're able to actually show it from a perspective. So we could just show the call center perspective, what's taking place between the customer pool and the case management pool. And we'll show that in a later session when we get into BPMN 2. I'm going to start wrapping up this video because it's running very long. And I think the BPM2 model session is going to be even longer. All right. I'll put chapters down below so you can skip ahead and put bookmarks and come back to when you at your leisure. Same thing applies for your case management. In this case, it's a platform. It's an architecture. There could be many humans that are managing the cases, developing the cases, looking at the cases from a legal or security perspective. There could be many, many business process flows that are taking place in each one of these pools. In this particular case, because it's a summary model and we're just getting started, is we're trying to show how these business processes apply to the pools, which, if you remember, each one of them has its own perspective. So when we go into tags, this is from the customer's perspective, and it's at the summary level. So these are custom tags. They're not canned in Sparx that you can create when each one of your projects to further define your elements as you're modeling. Let's now look at the properties for these elements. So I'm going to drag and drop the property tab just to the right of the model. Make the browser a little thinner. All right, and I don't need this much. This is fine. All right, so we're going to start with the start event. And I'm not going to go into general. I talked about that earlier. We're going to focus on the start event, the type, and the event itself. But we're going to really focus on just the properties that are in here. So I already explained these and don't need to explain them again. The start event, you can provide assignments. It could be relevant to another business process, another model within your class diagrams that's showing your code, your functions, that's triggering this event, all right? And then right now, this start event is really none. The start event could be, let me open this up, could be a message event that's inbound from a microservice, from a bus architecture. It could be on a timer, although I doubt it in this use case. It could be multiple, could be coming in from multiple different points before engagement. Like, for instance, the customer could call into an IVR platform, which is identifying the customer, maybe even doing some background work before it actually engages an agent that is available. And that's another business process flow to check availability. Could be a signal event, conditional, or link. Could be linked to another business process as it concludes. It could be linking to this business process, all right? So let me go back out and change this to none. When you're starting out and you're not sure, don't worry about it. Everything is none or abstract when I'm starting because we're just doing conceptual modeling. And then when we come back in, either with the stakeholders or outside of the elicitation exercise, we might further start defining how we believe the solution architecture is going to work. Next, let's go into customer information. So in customer information, it could be ad hoc, which, like I stated, I normally start at ad hoc, or it could be set to true, and then that kind of dominoes into the other properties. We're going to leave it at ad hoc or false. Ad hoc completion process, I explained that earlier, into the order. The default is parallel, could be sequential. Now, you might be looking at this going, well, you only have one sequence, so this is sequential, and that's fine. You can set that if you're sure that's what's going to be triggering this business process. You could set it to sequential, but I usually don't. I'll leave it at parallel because there might be more input required, identity management. There might be some fraud processing going on before the actual engagement, a lot of things. So I would leave it at parallel, but if you're more than 75% sure, no, it's just applicable here. There's a message event that comes in, and that's what triggers the whole thing, all right? Because the message event is going to have the payload showing that all the pre-processing has already taken place. Again, assignment, you can go out and you can look for assignment elements and bring those into the properties for this particular element. Then you have a category field, and this depends on a few things, how you define that. You could literally just type human active voice notes in here if you wanted to. You could put an XML schema or string in here. There's lots of things that you can put that you want to parse for any output processing. But during the conceptual exercise, we might just put some placeholder notes within the memo field in the beginning, all right? And then language, I already explained that. In this case here, this could be BPEL for people. This could be natural language processing using AI. This could be just Python calls via microservices, APIs, RESTful APIs, etc. So language, we'll talk about more when we get into examples in the following session in BPMN 2. Process type is none, right? So you have private, artifact, or collaboration. I explained those in the previous chapters. So I'm just going to leave it at none. Query language, I'm going to leave this blank. Status is none. In status, you have these various states or status you could put the business process in. So it may be coming in, and before it actually starts, there may be some processing, even within the composite model here, that creates a canceled event. It could be canceled in parallel with your security systems, that as the call center agent or the retail store agent face-to-face is engaging the customer, they could get a hold stating, hey, this is not the customer, this is a fraud. And you could be speaking about a business process that is dealing with that set of circumstances. All right, that's enough I'm going to say on that one. All right, so we're going to leave it at none because we're just working high level. Pull package reference would be the customer pool here. You could literally in this say, hey, this is coming from perspectives, and then drop that in here as the reference namespace. If you wish, I might leave it blank because there may be other pool references as you're modeling and building out the rest of the system that you want to bring in here. And that's not a problem. You can always come up here and just choose none and then blank it out or change it to something else. So performers, you have a memo field. I talked about this earlier. You have your input sets that could be coming in from your start event or during your process. There could be multiple input sets. And then you have your output sets, all right? What needs to be built during the business process flows in order to support the agent assistant business process flow, all right? And then I'm not going to talk about activities. We'll get into that in the next session, I hope, if there's time, as we drill down into BPMN2 models doing similar business processes. All right. So I'm not going to go through each one of these. It's the same thing. So you basically are setting your properties for each business process in the particular view, the set of concerns that you're working with. All right. And if we recall back to the TOGAF architectural concepts model, you have various views, viewpoints, and concerns, and you could build models using the same pools and business processes with different properties to expose those views, viewpoints, and concerns. All right? All right, so we're going to wrap this episode up. Leave comments down below, questions or concerns, good or bad. It helps us understand what's working and what's not working. Leave a like if you like the content. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. We have a lot of content to publish that's coming out for friends and business partners. And if you want to keep up, subscription with notifications turned on helps you. All right. And the next episode is going to be on BPMN2. We're going to have some show and tell. Not going to go deep into each one of the properties that I did today. We're going to do some basic modeling and try to keep the video as short as possible. All right. So until then, Happy modeling.